We have a lot to cover in today's video, including the latest trade talk around the Philadelphia Flyers, New York Islanders, and the Ottawa Senators. Plus, we had a huge three-team trade earlier today, number of signings as well. We'll discuss all of this news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover today. First up, in case you missed it earlier, there is a dedicated video on the channel, so I'm not going to go into as much detail. If you want a full in-depth analysis, you can check out the other video, which will be linked here in the YouTube cards up on the channel here. But Ivan Provorov and the Philadelphia Flyers made a big deal today, obviously, with Provorov going to the Columbus Blue Jackets via the Los Angeles Kings. It was a three-team deal between the Flyers, Kings, and Jackets. Worked out really well, in my opinion, for Philly and for LA. Columbus, well, we'll see if they can get Provorov playing like a top pair defenseman like he once was early in his career. It'll work out, but that's certainly, in my opinion, some risk involved. But essentially, Provorov goes to LA. LA retains 30% of the salary. Then he's flipped to Columbus with some other assets. So the Kings also get to shed some salary in the unfavorable contract of goalie Cal Peterson. And then, of course, defenseman Sean Walker, who's been rumored to be on the move for some time. So those two contracts go from LA to Philly. Philly sends, like I said, Provorov goes to LA, then off to Columbus. Columbus sends a first-round draft pick and a second-round draft pick to the Flyers. The Columbus first-round pick was the one that they actually got from LA at the deadline in the Gavrikov deal. And so that's LA's pick, number 22nd overall. That's now with the Flyers. They get a second from Columbus, a second from LA. Overall, it's a big day for Philly. They really get a big haul. They take on two contracts that maybe the Kings weren't overly fond of, but there's not a lot of term left on them. And in return, they get some good, and they also get prospect Helge Grant. So it really overall, it turned out to be a nice haul for the Flyers. Provorov gets moved, who's been rumored for some time, and we'll kind of go from there. But yeah, big day today. Trade season's fully upon us. Was not expecting this, as we have a break from the Stanley Cup Final. A lot of these deals only get consummated closer to the draft, but there's a lot of rumblings, and NHL executives are saying that there's a lot of chatter going on, and teams are being aggressive this year because of the lack of cap space and the lack of increase they're getting this year. So I would not be shocked if we see a few more deals than usual earlier than the draft as we get closer to that time frame. So like I said, if you want a more breakdown and in-depth analysis, check out the other video on the channel. But certainly a big way to start our news cycle here for the day. Of course, after that trade, the speculation was that the LA Kings were going to attempt to use the cap savings to sign UFA defenseman Vladislav Gavrikov. Of course, like I said, Gavrikov acquired from the Jackets at the deadline to the Los Angeles Kings. Kings were quite pleased with him. Played a lot with Drew Doughty in the top four. I know Doughty was quite fond of him, wanting to stay as well. Between Doughty, Gavrikov, Anderson, certainly some good pieces there. And there's some other speculation that the Kings could move another defenseman as well. Maybe a Sean Durzi, for example, is a possibility. But either way, yeah, the Gavrikov signing is something that might be in the works. The word is that between Gavrikov and his agent, Dan Milstein, that they'd only prefer a 2-year deal. That's all they're interested in right now, to remain in LA, and they're looking for fairly big money. It sounds like around $6 million per season. So we'll see. The Kings wanted to clear the cap space regardless. That wasn't done just to sign Gavrikov. That was one of their, obviously, priorities. But if for some reason they can't come to terms with him, they will have the extra space to go out and find a different defenseman that they can feel can replace him. So we'll see where that goes. Yeah, that's kind of a spin-off of that deal, the savings there in Los Angeles. Some other signings today. The Calgary Flames today announced that they've signed goalie Oscar Dansk. Dansk has been primarily an American Hockey League goalie for the Calgary Wranglers. He has been normally for the last few years, like a third, fourth stringer, so able to be called up. Does have a little bit of NHL experience, but he gets a 1-year, 2-way contract extension. Buffalo Sabres defenseman Lawrence Pilot, who's been out of the league and then back to the league, is leaving it again. Pilot, after returning to the Sabres after a stint away, is signing a 2-year contract to go over to the Swiss League. Essentially, the first time around, I think it's fair to say that the Sabres didn't exactly handle his development properly. He left for a while, but while he was gone, they obviously had a change in management, which done a much better job of stocking the cupboards on the back end. They get some high picks. Of course, Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, they've all worked out, and now there's not really much room for him there. So didn't get much playing time this past year. and off he goes again to Switzerland. So I would fair say that's probably the end of his NHL opportunities, but time will tell. The Lightning have signed a prospect here. They got Emil Martinson, who's a 2-year ELC. He's a Norwegian left shot defenseman who was originally a 4th-round pick of the Arizona Coyotes in 2021, but never signed with Arizona and has signed now with Tampa as a free agent. The Blue Jackets have signed a pending restricted free agent defenseman, Jake Christensen. He had very limited NHL action this year, is mostly a minor leaguer, but he gets a 1-year, 2-way contract extension. So those are all your signings for today. The other big news we had is we finally heard from Lou Lamoriello. All this time since their season has been over, the Islanders general manager finally spoke to the media today. Well, of course, he was asked why he didn't address the media on locker cleanout day and why it took so long for this arrangement to take place. And to be honest, we shouldn't be one bit surprised. But essentially, Lamoriello said that he didn't feel it was important to answer questions. He didn't have, to him, it wasn't a big priority. That he kind of had his own questions that he wanted to find answers to before he ever spoke to anybody publicly. So, again, I know it frustrates a lot of fans. He's not the only GM that's kind of keeps to himself this way, but, you know, a lot of teams like to hear from their management team and, to some degree, ownership, who's completely silent on Long Island. You never hear from Scott Malkin, besides when he bought the team. Afterwards, there's been no sign or you don't hear from him. So it's all on Lou. And Lou said that to confirm him and Lane Lambert both under contract next year, they will both be with the New York Islanders, so don't expect any changes in that regard. There's been some talk of Lou was going to be back or not. Was there any pressure for ownership to make a change? Or is there a possibility Lou might be moving up to be a president and bring in somebody else to manage the team? That doesn't appear to be happening, unless we have no indication of that right now. He was somewhat non-committal to confirm all the coaching staff will be back, though, so the fact that they missed the playoffs, I would suspect, gives us the indication that some of Lane Lambert's staff could be changed up. So we'll have to see about that. Well, I would suspect, though, that if they're going to make changes, that they shouldn't be waiting too long to do so, for the sake of the people that might be swapped out, for them to have other employment, and obviously to have a decent pool of people to pick from to bring in. You would think they wouldn't want to wait too long to do that, but we'll see. At this point, like I said, just no confirmation for sure he was going to make a change. Just seemed non-committal to say that they'd all return. We did get confirmation that recovery for Oliver Wahlstrom was going well. He's skating now. He should be back and ready for training camp. Same with Alex Romanov. He should be good to go for training camp as well. He mentioned he still has a lot of confidence in Noah Dobson. Still feels he'll be an elite offensive defenseman in this league. That he's still quite young and still obviously very patient, and feels he gets criticized too much, which is probably fair to say to some extent. They did talk about other players that he's hoping will come back, but mentioned that he'd have interest in re-signing Zach Parise again. Parise is still deciding if he's going to play next year, talking to his family. And obviously guys like Varlamov, Mayfield, he expressed interest to re-sign as well. One player, though, that he did actually admit one thing, which was surprising, because typically he talks a lot about loyalty, and we know Lou kind of doesn't really say much publicly, but he did admit that Josh Bailey's time with the team might be coming to an end. He just kind of talked about the fact that loyalty obviously was important, but loyalty wasn't going to stand in the way of doing what's right for the team. And he did say that, you know, even though the times might be coming to an end for Bailey on Long Island. So I know Bailey himself at the end of the season said if he was going to be a healthy scratch that's sitting out all the time, that wasn't something he was keen on being a part of. So I do imagine that he said Lou said him and Bailey had to have a talk and see if they can't figure out what's best for him, which I suspect they're going to try to trade him. If they can't, then they're going to have to consider a buyout. A buyout at this point in his contract with so little time left really wouldn't be all that inexpensive. Like, it's not out of the realm of possibilities. We could see that. Either way, I do not see Josh Bailey being back on Long Island next year. Otherwise, he said he also had confidence that Matt Barzal would be able to be productive and successful as a full-time winger. Now that they have Horvat and have them two play together for an entire season, that seems to be the plan in that regard. Again, committed to the fact that he was, had a lot of confidence in this core group of players. So we'll see. Personally, I would suspect that we're going to see not a ton of changes on Long Island, although I would hope he tries to bring in at least one scorer to help the top six. They need to be able to score more, and we'll see what else he does. I don't know. This is certainly a team that does need some changes, but he didn't really give us much to go by. It wasn't an overly newsy type of press conference from Lamoriello, who really we shouldn't have really expected much else. Said it's just so long since he's spoken. I don't think he really understands why things like that are important to the fans, and just kind of goes to the beat of his own drum. Essentially, does what he wants, and that's just how Lou rolls, and we should be used to that here, of course, by now. But the main change on Long Island will be Bailey, with the possibility of them maybe making a trade for a top 6 forward. We'll have to see how the rest of it goes. I mean, if Mayfield doesn't re-sign, they're likely going to have to go on the market, and whether it be free to see or trade to find another defenseman. We'll see. Obviously, Lou doesn't let much leak out, so there's not really a whole lot of insiders that know usually what he is up to. In Ottawa, we got word from Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun and TSN, and other reporters are talking about it as well, indicating they have confirmation that Pierre Dorion, the GM of the Sens, is kind of exploring the trade market on forward Alex Debrincat. Essentially, this has not really come as a big surprise. Debrincat's a pending RFA. We know that the Senators have every intention of wanting to sign him long-term, but right now they don't have a full decision on Debrincat yet from him if he wants to sign and stay long-term. So at the end of the day, word was that he was waiting for the ownership situation to change. He kind of wanted to get an idea who the new owners were going to be, get a vision for them, see what other changes they make before he decides on his long-term future. So it makes sense that they're going to kind of gauge the trade market to see what's out there and what might be available. Because if they find out that he doesn't want to sign, they have to protect themselves and trade him. They could sign him for 1 year, but then he could become a UFA and walk for nothing, which they don't want to have happen. Obviously, that would be a travesty after giving up some draft picks for him and then having him walk with nothing in return. They'd be starting over again. It's hard to replace what he brings, and if they can't sign him, they need to try to find a comparable player, or at least somebody who can play a solid top 6 role. I mean, clearly he didn't have as great a season last year. It was a big adjustment on a new team, new system, new coach. I would suspect if he does stick around, we'll see better results this time around. He didn't even always have the center he was supposed to play with. Josh Norris was supposed to be his full-time center, and he got hurt like 4 or 5 games into the season. So that certainly played a role not always having a legit top 6 center on his line. So we'll see what happens here. I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to trade Debrincat, but like I said, they have to be ready just in case if he says, I'm not going to sign more than 1 year and I don't have interest in staying long term, then that's kind of his decision and his right, and they have to protect themselves. But there's lots of teams we know are going to have interest. Right now, he's not linked to any teams, just that the Sens are certainly out there having conversations, trying to get an idea what the market might fetch should it get to that point. Hopefully we'll get this sale wrapped up. I know the Board of Governors meeting is June 22nd. It's believed that there's hope that the sale could be wrapped up in time for that to be on the docket for that meeting. Obviously, we could have a better idea who the owners are going to be and what their vision might be, and I'll help him make a decision before we get to the draft. So we'll see how that goes. Of course, earlier today with the Ivan Provorov trade at Philly, word leaked out before the full details of the Provorov trade were even fully out that the Flyers were also heavily engaged in trade talks around goaltender Carter Hart. And after seeing the return package of the Provorov deal, I think it's fair to say that Carter Hart is definitely done with the Flyers and will be moved to some other NHL team between now and the draft, most likely. Now, NHL reporters originally made it sound like we could see a deal today. Now, most of them are saying that that's not likely. Not even a guarantee it could happen in the next few days. More than anything, I think these conversations are going to heat up. It could happen ahead of the draft, or it could happen at the draft. It's really difficult to say. If you look around some of the teams that were mentioned as being potential suitors, there's at least probably 4 or 5 that make sense, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's more in the conversation. There's bound to be teams who you don't think of when you think of a goalie trade because you think they have their goalie situation sorted out. But if they see Carter Hart as an upgrade over what they currently have and they can find a way to make it better, then they're going to explore that. So I know one team that Dave Pagnotta, the fourthperiod.com, mentioned, because they were the first ones to put out there today about Carter Hart discussions going on, as possibly even the Maple Leafs. Now, the Maple Leafs were, I think it's fair to say that if they trade for Carter Hart, that means they're not going to bring back and sign Ilya Samsonov. That does make sense to me. Joseph Woll, I think, has earned an opportunity. And they could go with Hart and Samsonov for maybe a year, but certainly Woll, to me, makes more sense from a cap perspective, as well as the fact that he played well in big moments down the stretch and in the playoffs. And I think he's deserved an opportunity to be at least considered a backup at the full-time level of the NHL next year. So we'll see. But I mean, if they look at his Hart being an upgrade over Samsonov, then maybe Samsonov ends up getting traded or something. You never know. Although I'm not completely convinced or sold that they would be the destination, but they could probably put together an interesting package. I wouldn't even rule out the Flyers dealing with LA again. If you think about it, their goaltending situation is not completely sorted. They could re-sign Korpisalo. They only have Phoenix Copley under contract right now after trading Cal Peterson today. So, is it possible they could connect again? Maybe another three-way deal? It's possible. I know even Dennis Bernstein of the fourth period even mentioned that he thinks LA might be more likely to go after a guy like Connor Hellebuyck out of Winnipeg. That could even lead to a potential different deal. But besides the Leafs, besides the Kings, who I would not rule out, there's some talk about teams like Ottawa, Montreal. Would Ottawa, who I just mentioned, are shopping Debrincat, would that be a trade? To me, it could make sense, but the only problem is it looks like the Flyers are going into rebuild mode. I don't know if they'd want to acquire Alex Debrincat unless they could flip him or it became a 3-team deal and another asset went to Philly instead. Hard to say, but certainly wouldn't be shocked if Ottawa's exploring that possibility, given the fact that their goaltending situation is not ironed out and sorted out for the next number of years. If they could get their hands on Carter Hart and they had to move to Debrincat, but they might have to move anyway, that might be an option for them. We'll have to see. LA, Ottawa, Montreal, to some degree Toronto, and there's other teams too, but if you look around, I don't see teams that are going to be rebuilding right now. Would not be where he would go. There's also talk about John Gibson being on the trade market too. So you're going to have some more experienced goalies, like different levels of experience and different levels of what they have for contracts available on the goalie market. It's going to get very interesting with knowing that Carter Hart's fully out there to be traded. Connor Hellebuyck, a good chance. Then you get John Gibson. Those are three veterans, all at different stages of their career, different ages, different cap hits. That could be intriguing for a number of teams. And then not to mention some, other maybe lesser names out there as well. So it's going to be an interesting offseason. It could be extremely busy. Like I said, with a low cap increase and tight situations around the league, teams are having to be creative and aggressive, and it could get very interesting here down the stretch. So we'll see what happens with Carter Hart. But at this point, all signs point to the fact that he's definitely getting traded. Just a matter of knowing where he's going and what the return is. So let me know your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.